Survival Dispatch Insider, and today we are going to talk about developing a communications plan. I've written articles about this before, and we're going to take you through the mind map, which is what I use to actually develop the articles that we've talked about, and I use it for teaching this class to folks in person. So let's just start about here and some of the things that you want to do. First part you need to look at is what I call capabilities assessment. What do you have around you, and both in terms of systems that you can use, repeater systems that you can use, and what equipment do you have, what training do you have. So first of all, what's available? The basic landline. Most people do not have a wired phone in their house anymore. But if you do, that's more likely to work when cell phones and other things don't. They'll work even if the power's out, providing you've got a plain old telephone that you just plug in the wall, not a remote phone, etc. It doesn't need power. Very few places have them. A lot of emergency management folks have gone back and put those back in because they know they're going to work when other stuff doesn't. Do you have cell service? What provider do you have? What's the coverage of that provider? I know when I first moved to Colorado about 5 years ago now, I discovered that the service provider I had, once I got outside of the kind of Denver metropolis into some more rural areas, I had no signal. And at that point I didn't have a separate GPS unit, and I found out I didn't have navigation because I was relying on my cell phone. Fix that problem really quick. Do you have GMRS repeaters? GMRS is a radio service similar to ham, except it's limited to a single band, the 440 band. Your license, you still need a license, but it's a one-time fee for 10 years. Currently I think $65, and it covers everybody in your family. Some places and some folks have repeaters up. You can find those repeaters fairly cheaply because a number of years ago, everybody that was on the commercial stuff had to go to narrow band, which meant they had to throw out that equipment. So there's lots of it surplus out there you can use. With a slight tweak, it'll work. Limited in power, but again, if you've got a good location, you can put that up and have your own repeater on the air. What do you have for ham radio? So repeaterbook.com, best resource to go to. At least it'll point you to where to look and confirm information on a club's website as to what repeaters they have. Look and see, are they linked repeaters? Does a repeater cover where you and your family work or are during the day in the normal course of your travels? Map that stuff out. Is there analog? Are there digital? We talk in another video about the differences between analog and digital and different capabilities that are out there between digital side, D-Star, DMR, etc. But again, know what is there. Also, do some research and find out what are the amateur radio emergency services, ARES groups, using in your area. That's important, one, from an intelligence standpoint, that if things go bad, you can go there and listen. Two, you want to avoid that as your communications method because it's going to be busy with the stuff for emergency services. So, again, awareness. Looking at equipment. What equipment do you have? Do you just have Baofeng radios or BTEC radios, little handhelds? Yes, they're cheap, but they do the job. You can have several of those, especially starting out. What equipment can we afford? Do we need to upgrade? What repeaters can we reach from our normal day-to-day stuff where we work, at home? And I've suggested, and I think I mentioned this in one of the articles I wrote, but do yourself a little matrix. List the repeaters, try them out. Can I hit it from home? Can I hit it from work? Can I hit it to the normal place that I go shopping? Other members of our family or our group, if we've got a preparedness group or mutual assistance group, whatever you call it, can we all reach the same ones? If you do yourself a little matrix with that, repeaters down this side, people down this side, or location, you can figure out what's common and base your planning on that. What can we reach simplex? This is important if it's a massive event that takes out the power. Most repeaters, especially these days, have some kind of backup power, whether it be generator, solar, etc. So they'll be on the air for a while. But it's important to know what you can use on simplex from location, because if you don't need to use a repeater and broadcast your information to anybody around the area, simplex is a good place to go. So knowing that, your capabilities, that's where you start. All right, from there, a couple of things we need to consider about security. Well, actually, let me go down to frequency selection first. So knowing what you have, you can start working on what can you use. Whether it just be repeaters, simplex, if you have HF capabilities, you also want to know where the regular nets are for your area or your other friends. And we'll talk in another video about NVIS and HF communications. With GMRS, again, you've got the options of simplex and repeaters. You might want to assign a designator for your channels. Now, if you've all got the same radio, it's easy. You program them the same. So you can say, go to channel 1, go to channel 2. That way you're not giving out the actual frequency to everybody and they can just hop over. Yes, they can find you with some searching, but you just make it more difficult to them. Designate primary and secondary frequencies that you're going to use. So this is our first one we're going to go to, but if it's busy or not working, we're going to go to this one or this one or this one, etc. Again, as I mentioned a little bit ago, avoid the Aries designated frequencies. And that's easy to know. Just go look at your club sites, etc., because you'll know where those regular nets are. They make also, sometimes they might have weather nets. If you've got severe weather in your area, which we've been having just recently, you might want to know what are the designated weather channels, weather frequencies, where weather spotters are, so you can get information that way. All right, let's talk about a little bit about communication security. We're going to do another video on this one later on, but communication security, you don't want to tell everybody. If you figured out something bad's going on, you don't want to tell everybody. You want to give yourself time to put your plans into action. So with communication security, remembering that in normal day-to-day use in ham radio, you cannot use any phrase, and I think the exact wording or very close to it in the FCC rules is, anything intended to disguise the meaning of the message. Now, having said that, you could still have a message that says something like, hey, I'm on my way home, I'm going to pick up pizza at Domino's or Pizza Parlor or Joe's Pizza or whatever. And your family knows that that's the code word, right? Because you don't get pizza from there, especially in the middle of the week, maybe. So that could be a word. Or, hey, like when I get home, we're going to go over and see Grandma. All right? Something like that that could pass for a normal day-to-day conversation you're having with a family member on the radio. Other ways, when things get a lot more complicated, and we're going to talk more about this on another video, there are secure ways of doing communications with one-time pads or stenograph. How do you authenticate a message? Those kind of things. And we'll talk more to that in another video because that gets in a little more depth. And that's for when it's an extended issue where the lights aren't coming back on for quite some time and you want to be able to pass messages. Remembering that anything you say on radio, anybody else is going to hear. So there may be times when things have gone really wrong and Big Brother FCC isn't around and nothing's coming back, then you might want to have a way to make pass messages so that not everybody else knows where you are, what you're doing, etc. That's just advertising and asking for problems. Let's see. Putting it together, well, let's go over to talk about actually trigger points. So we kind of mentioned some of these things. So when you have a plan, and this plan isn't just for communications, it's really for when things go wrong. What are your trigger points? Some of this is part of situational awareness. So AMRON is a group of preparedness, like-minded folks that are radio operators. So their function is not the same as like your Aries, RACES programs, which are there to do public service. AMRON is specifically for a very bad day. And I strongly suggest you go look at their website. It's amron.com. There's a lot of good information there and join. But they have these things called AMRON communications conditions. And there are 5 levels, different levels for what's going on. And so they monitor, their standard communications. So let's go over here and look at this little chart. And so, level 5, there's nothing going on. Level 4, incident possible. I know they went to one of these when there were some large-scale things going on, or large-scale events like an inauguration, and they've done it for some other wildland fires and things like that that have caused problems. So if you use this, it's a good indicator, and if you're part of AMRO and you get the notification that something's changed, it's a heads up, something's going on, maybe I need to pay more attention. There are other groups that listen to, I mentioned one-time pads. There's a number of stations out there that are broadcasting all the time. They are broadcasting one-time pad messages. And there are groups that listen to that stuff. Not that they can decode it, but we've seen where things started going frosty in the other parts of the world, North Korea at times, obviously right now with Iran. And those communications start increasing. So being aware of that stuff, noticing that something's going on, what's happened recently with the oil tankers, is that something, is it not? Again, mainstream media is not going to report on it until it becomes a big issue. It might be things you want to do. Something to think about. All the floods that have occurred in the Midwest recently, what's the impact of that going to be 6 months from now? It's impacted their growing season. So think about those kind of things when you looking at trigger levels and stuff like that. So with that mentioning, AMRO changes in their communications conditions. There's also a website that posts changes in world events, similar to the military's DEFCON thing, and they'll post advisories when they think the conditions have changed. Something else, you can join the website, get those notifications. Events that are going to cause shortages or potential shortages of fuel, food, and water. I think I just mentioned two of them, the fuel situation and the food situation. Maybe that's a trigger for you to start doing things if you haven't been. If that occurs suddenly, maybe that's part of the triggering mechanism for your group or you individually to start doing, maybe stashing up on some more long-term food supplies and things like that. Any incident that could implicate martial law being imposed. So things like sudden holiday being declared. Never a good thing. If you start seeing National Guard deployments, things like that, unannounced travel restrictions, things like that occurring. And again, this would be a very bad day. Most people might think, oh, it's just going to be for a day or two. To me, I'd be looking at other things. Rapid devaluation in currency. We've seen that with Venezuela, what's occurred there. Outbreak of deadly or contagious diseases. Ebola spiking again, and we've had folks coming in across the southern border from some of those countries. Maybe something to keep your eye on in some of the non-mainstream media resources that you might have. Any event, a persistent event of unsafe condition. Could be a run, could be street riot that's continued over days over something that was relatively trivial. We see that with police-involved shootings or court announcements of verdict. But if it goes on over an extended period of time, be aware of that. Runs on banks, never a good sign. Invasion of the U.S., that would be an obvious sign. I think every blade of grass, there's a rifle behind it. Remember the Japanese said that. That's why they would never consider invading us. Severe threat of nuclear, biological, chemical attacks. Yeah, that kind of goes up and down. Contested presidential election causing unrest. I won't say a lot more on that one. Suspension or validation of the Constitution or part thereof. Announced intended confiscation of guns, etc. Again, big flags, big red flags. Weather events. Extended periods of inclemental weather. They're going to have an impact on food, delivery supplies. Most of your grocery stores, just-in-time ordering. When you scan that barcode or they scan the barcode at checkout, the computer behind the scenes is creating the order for the next day. If that stuff doesn't work, that truck can't get there, that store is going to run out very quickly. We've seen it with hurricanes coming on the East Coast, how quickly food and other items disappear from the market. So imagine that when something happens. Extraordinary events, again, don't have volcanoes that many around here. Earthquakes, though, could cause the same kind of problems, disruption of transportation systems. Obviously, wide-scale terrorist attacks. We've seen attempts at that, not been too successful so far, but the good guys have got to be right every day. The bad guys only need to be right on one day. So just something to remember. Let's see, black sky event. So a black sky event is an event that it affects the power distribution or power, etc. There is an organization called the Electrical Infrastructure Security Council, EIS Council, and they do a black sky exercise every year, worldwide exercise done over the web, and there are components in it that you can do as a family or group. Runs a scenario, asks you questions, etc. What would you do under these circumstances? I participated last year as part of where I work, and in fact this past year we helped them put a segment of that together because it didn't adequately address transportation. So good exercise to go look at their site. If you Google or search your favorite search engine, EIS Black Sky, there's a very, very good video that's a good awakening video for folks. And there's a lot of information on their site. But it can be caused by a lot of different things. You can see here EMP, widespread cyber terrorism, coordinated physical attacks, large seismic events, coronal mass ejection. And we've come close to some of those coronal mass ejection events in the past few years. And that would be a very bad day. All right, so let's go over to kind of putting it all together here. So this is just some stuff that I kind of came up with and said, you know, if AMCON's using the condition anywhere between 5 and 3, we have these things available to us. Group message programs, and I think we're going to do a video on some of these more specifically, but text messages will work a lot of times when voice doesn't. You've got messenger programs, you've got Facebook, MeWe's another app, secure apps such as Signal, WhatsApp, Unseen. These are all different apps that you can have on your phone. Some are one-to-one, some are one-to-group, some are text-only, some do voice. So different options that you have there. One of the group voice apps I've seen used a lot is Zello. Basically radio on your cell phone. And I know last year with a lot of the flooding, the Cajun Navy was using that to coordinate their rescue efforts down in some of the southern Gulf Coast areas. If AMCON condition goes up to level 2, you know, this is where we're going to start losing some of our normal public communication services. Might not have cell phones or at least disrupted. So look at some other things that you might be switching over to using repeaters, what the Aries groups are doing, but finding things that are repeaters that are not used much. I mentioned in one of the other videos about using the 220 band. Some areas that's not used hardly at all. And now you can get a radio made by BTEC that's very similar to the Bofong, uses all the same interchangeable parts. It's called the UV5X3, and it has the 220 band in it. Up till now, very few hand manufacturers have marketed a handheld radio with that in. So with the availability of that, you know, consider that as one of your radios. You can go to that frequency or those frequencies, and chances are nobody else is there. So you might be using Signal, digital stuff. We're going to do a video on digital messaging with ham radio. APRS, Automatic Packet Reporting System. I've been a ham 25 years, just got into that in the last several months. Really cool. And you can actually do text messaging over it. So text messaging over the APRS network. Really, really cool. Got involved with a search and rescue group that uses it to track their people when voice communications doesn't work. So great. If we go up to condition 1, then that's when you start looking at authenticating messages from people, having code words, one-time pad, stuff like that. So again, we've done some articles on this. The February last year and this year issues and a couple of other issues. There's a lot on your communication stuff, putting plans together. If you like this video and you got questions, hit the like below. If you have questions, we'll try and answer them. And go over to Survival Dispatch Insider. We've got lots more information on this, as well as a lot of other stuff to do with your preparedness. If If you like this, again, like below. And for now, catch you on the air sometime.